So hi everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Becoming the Light from the Shadow of Abuse. And today's guest, I know she has a host of information for you on, well, a different aspect of abuse actually. So this is Heather Belle Murphy. I'm going to leave her to mostly talk, but we're going to be addressing the fact here that the trauma from abuse doesn't necessarily have to be from the traditional types that we think of, emotional, physical, and sexual, but that trauma can happen in many ways that are actually unintended, and that trauma happens inside of you and is the way the mind and the body react to something that happens outside of you, and that could be many, many things. So I'm going to leave Heather to talk to you about that and share with you her experiences and her insights. So welcome, Heather.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to, talk to you from across the miles like this. It's amazing. We're so blessed with technology. It's just incredible.
I think it's obviously we're recording this in the COVID episode at the moment. And I think that technology is keeping us all sane. We're all connecting in this way. But I know from the chat that we had just before, I'm so looking forward to what you have got to share with our listeners, because I think that so many people, they almost feel guilty about thinking that they are reacting in a certain way, or that they have some illness, or that something is wrong with them. And they'll often say, well, but I didn't actually suffer any abuse or have a trauma. Why do I feel like this? And I know you're going to share your story, which really throws some light on that. Quite amazing what happened to you and where it led. But before we get to what happened in your past, tell us who you are today. Tell us what you're up to, what you do, and then we'll look at the story behind it.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm an executive coach, and I tend to work with men in finance circles or real estate and things like that. And that could encompass helping them overcome a limiting belief, or it might encompass, helping them to get healthier, do some dietary work, or help them with an addiction such as quitting smoking. So it's quite lovely. I get often to sort of start doing some health coaching with those guys, and then we go into a bit more upgrading of mindset and things like that, which I absolutely love. It's one of my superpowers. And then I'm, growing a global women's empowerment network, because it's been amazing being an executive coach, mainly working with guys in the last 5 years. But I really want to start, having really healed myself deeply, healed my life deeply. It's time for me to start to go down that path of, sharing these superpowers with women in happiness and health and love and money. If we get time later, Sarah, I'll talk to you about, what I discovered, which is the greatest, I think, limiting belief for healers. And when I finally figured out what it was 5 years ago, it drastically changed my life in becoming financially freer, which is this love, money, service, unconscious value conflict, which is this brain sex thing. Anyway, I'll rewind a little bit.
I know exactly what you're talking about there, and I know how that shows up. And I also love the transition that you've already made. So, and this is so important for people to understand about healing and development. So first of all, when we're working on our own healing, we are in a certain place, like you at the moment. You're an executive you're an executive coach, and people would look at you and say, oh, you're already successful. That's who she is. That's her career. But here's what happens when we do personal development and we're constantly working on ourselves. What you said so beautifully was, I've now got to a stage in my own healing where what I want to do is, so it's looking at the place where you're already really successful but realizing that there is so much more to you, that through all this work, you're actually becoming someone else yet again and developing in a different way, and now moving into this women's empowering movement. And I think this is so useful for people. I think sometimes we get made to feel guilty when we already are successful about something else that we want to do. People will look at it and say, well, what do you want to do that for? You've already got X. Well, and it's very hard then to explain, yes, but I'm becoming someone else, or yes, but I have a desire to do this. And I think it's so important for people, men and women, to hear that it is okay to keep growing. It's okay to keep changing and to realize that there is more to you.
Yes.
And
yes.
don't get stuck by the people that are saying, oh, I had this when I opened my first restaurant, and then I said I wanted to do a second one many years ago now when I was a different person, and people were like, oh, what do you want a second one for? You've already got one. And then from there, when I started business coaching, well, what are you doing that for? You've got 2 restaurants. And it's led me to where I am now. So this is your path. You
yes.
can become whoever you want. Whatever is burning inside of you, don't take any notice of the people that are trying to keep you stuck in the box that you're in now. So I said more about that than I
We can't help it. We love talking to each other.
I got on a bit of a wagon about that one because I see it and I hear it all the time, and I've experienced it myself. So I hope people take something from that. So that's what you're doing now.
It kind of makes me... It kind of makes me laugh. It's like when people are and I was the same. It was like when I went to do my first coaching modality about 10 years ago, I thought, I need to know what my life purpose is. I'm still looking for my life. And it's like now I realize it's just this, it's like the road unfolds and it takes you on this, other journey. Maybe I'll end up running an orphanage in Bangladesh in 20 years' time. Who knows? But it's so lovely. Being able to share more parts of yourself, more authentic parts of yourself, as you go down this path. So, darling, I'll quickly rewind to the beginning and sort of clue everybody else in on where we'd got to. So, I suffered a lot of birth trauma when I was born. I was induced 2 weeks early because mum's maternal antibodies were killing my blood. I was a rhesus negative baby. I'm a positive blood type. I'm the 3rd child to mum, and she has a negative blood type. So when my brother was a positive, he primed mum to start making these maternal antibodies. So I had to be induced early, otherwise if they'd left me full-time, I would have been dead on arrival. When I was born, I had an immediate full blood transfusion. I was orange. I was so jaundiced. So you can imagine my womb journey probably wasn't amazing either. And the funny thing was, who knows whether this is just a belief that I had, but who knows whether it's real. But I grew up with that feeling different from everybody else, not really wanting to be here this lifetime, wondering whether mum truly wanted me. I sort of grew up with that. I knew that I was really loved. I've got intensely beautiful, loving parents. Mum has been my... She calls me her mini mum, like Austin Powers. I'm her mini me and she's my mini mum. And look, in a funny kind of a way, mum grew up in London during the Blitz and her house was bombed. So when she was about 5, she was wearing a tin helmet on her head and a gas tank on her back and going to school. And, they're worried about bombs being dropped and, mustard gas and all those sort of things. So I think... And then mum was a 10-pound pom, came here in the 50s, by absolute miracle, met my father, who is a complete saint. She'd married her rapist. She'd eloped to Gretna Green. Her first husband, my sister's father, was her rapist who she married. There was so much shame around it. She wasn't a virgin. Her parents wouldn't speak to her, so she eloped with him.
Wow.
So Mum's got this, whole other amazing story. And I think, and then she met my father, who's just an absolute dear and a saint. And Mum, so when I was hyperactive, very bad, irritable bowel syndrome, probably PTSD as a child. Mum had lost her breast milk, so I wasn't breastfed. And first of all, I didn't get all that comfort from being breastfed, and that really, amazing physical nurturing that happens. But also, my biome was not well set up, my, internal gut health. And now 70% of our immune system is actually in the gut. So there was birth trauma, not being sort of, properly nourished as a child, having diarrhea right throughout my childhood, bringing up the cow's milk formula. So Mum was really worried about my nutrition. And then when I was about 5, Mum went in to have a radical hysterectomy. She'd had terrible fibroids and she'd been bleeding. So that freaked me out when she went into hospital for that extended stay. But she came home, and instead of getting on with her life 6 weeks later, minus all this heavy bleeding, she felt as though she'd been run over by a truck. And so she went to bed for about 2.5 years. And then I became the carer child, but I was also the sick child. And we're having a laugh about this before, when we're doing rapid transformational therapy with the amazing Marissa Peer. When Marissa Peer unpacked on our first or second day, you've got like the archetypes in the family of the kids, the carer child, the sick child, the brilliant child, or the rebel. I was all of them. And I said to Megan, who I was sitting next to in RTT, I understand why I had such a busy childhood. I was being everything. And after Mum's breakdown, we became kind of more insular, but, I was incredibly codependently mixed up with Mum. And my whole thing was fixing Mummy, trying to make Mummy happy. Mum spent a whole lot of time in bed taking, Valium or sleeping pills or all those sorts of things. And then I was still really sick through my childhood. So then by the age of 13, finally I saw a gastroenterologist after being put on starvation diets and I used to drink Mylanta and Disprins and aspirins and all kind of things and Panadol. And then after a particularly bad bout, our local doctor, I went to a gastroenterologist. And so I had a barium X-ray and I was diagnosed with a duodenal ulcer. So I was literally eating away with myself. I was the brilliant child, but I was like Lisa Simpson. I was just a massive anticipatory anxiety about everything, having to dot every I, cross every T, not letting myself draw outside the lines in those days. So it's amazing when you start to unravel, when you start to unravel off all of that cortisone and all that stress and all that stuff. Oh goodness. And then, but wait, there's more, Sarah. And then when I was 15, I'd been babysitting for a single dad for a couple of years from the age of when his daughter was 7 and she was now 9 and I was 13, I was now 15. And he thought it would be a really great idea at the end of a babysitting job one night when he came home from a party and it was very, very late, to put on a porno, to make me a cocktail and put on a porno and, start kissing me and groping me and getting inside my clothing. And so because I was so compliant, and I also had the nice Christian girl upbringing as well, which is another kind of warper because being so codependent and a bit shy and meeting, trying to please everybody and meet everybody's needs and be the cake baker or, be the pacifist, be the giving. So luckily my sense of self-protection did jump in and pretty much, before he raped me, I managed to untangle myself and get off the couch and, put my clothes together. And he then took me home. And and I thought, I can't tell my parents this, it would kill them. So, I locked up all that incredible dirt and grief and shame, and it was my fault inside me. And, which added to another level. And then that triggered anorexia. So, my life was out of control. Plus, about 3 weeks later, we'd gone to the Gold Coast when I was a teenager. And then 3 weeks later, we moved back to Victoria. And so then I had to go to, my third high school in 4 years. And the latest high school that I went to was culturally very different from my upbringing. So, I had a hard time fitting in with the kids there. So, hey, when your life is out of control, what can you control? What you eat.
Right.
So I went on my journey of anorexia, and at my worst, when I was doing year 12, I was 36 kilograms. So I'm about 66 kilograms now. So I'm 30 kilograms lighter.
Amazing.
When I was trying to do HSC, and basically I thought that I would get through by eating an orange. My thing was I would eat an orange a day. That's what I was supposed to exist on. And I had such a raging pathological killer critic in those days. My sort of being obsessive about doing well in school and being instantly the best at everything. Not that I was competitive, but it's like if I wasn't amazing at something, I just wouldn't do it. And I was really good at stuff, and I had a mega memory. So, schoolwork was just an absolute piece of cake. And so by 17, I really had a bit of a breakdown in year 12. And, of course, my grades went absolutely, down the drain. So for the first time in my life, I was scraping passes, and I didn't get on well with my English teacher, and English had always been my greatest subject. So having a personality clash with my English teacher, I stopped handing in work. So then I scraped a pass through HSC. It really wrote my academic career off. And luckily, actually, I think it was personality, really. I did a bit of a summer school in chemistry and maths, but I actually really talked myself into a higher education position because I just didn't have the marks, but I wrote them a really nice letter of introduction. So I got into my first college thing. And then 2 years later, I started, or about 3 years later, I started naturopathy, and I began to study that. And, basically, people used to think that we sat down and meditated or something, but actually, it was pretty much a nutritional science degree, health science degree with medical herbal medicine. We did a few woo-woo things, and being a gorgeous 90s Fitzroy alternative naturopath with super long hair and crystals and all the gorgeous things, it was fantastic. But I was still super, super neurotic. So, and we'll get into this a bit later, but, this brain sex thing about understanding when we're traumatized, as well as it really getting rid of our buffer system, our emotional threshold. So you become that psychic sponge, and you think you're being just incredibly empathic, but, you're just really this psychic sponge that just sucks up everything. But also, I was deeply unhappy, deeply depressed. In my practice as a naturopath in those days, I would attract exactly, projection. I would attract exactly women who were depressed, who'd been abused, had anorexia. My inside mirrored my outside. And in those days, my idea of empathy was, holding someone's hand, and basically we both cry about, as they unpack their stories. I was completely the wounded healer, not empathic in the true sense at all, as in beaming love at someone, in the face of fear. I would feel terrible with them and gutted with them, and isn't it terrible? And I didn't have the skills I'd improve their diet a bit and make them feel better, but in no way did I have the unpack skills to unpack this, or really to unpack this and change this projection of this.
Which we know, because both of us are RTT therapists, and we know that that's the sledgehammer tool,
that's it.
the unpacking of the subconscious. So before we go on with all this, it's all fascinating. I just want to make a couple of points, because I think it's really important for people to understand. People are almost apologetic, as we said in the beginning, about blaming their problems on abuse. But abuse, sexual abuse, will trigger something like anorexia, like bulimia, because of the guilt, the shame, and the lack of self-worth that it comes with, that it forces on a person. And I think it was really important the way you said that, the way you were talking about the sexual abuse, and then you said it triggered your anorexia, and I can absolutely see that, and I can see that being so invaluable to some people listening to this, to understand that your anorexia, your bulimia, they're not your fault. That there's nothing wrong with you, that you're a product of your environment and your experiences, and something has caused this. But then I wanted to go back as well to, you use this wonderful phrase, and we know that the harsh words that we say to ourselves are one of the biggest causes of depression. And you were talking about this killer critic. And I thought it's also important for people to understand how this got set up inside you. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the way we normally see this is when children, and there'll be so many in your situation, where they have huge unmet childhood needs. Through yours, it wasn't your mother's fault. She had this horrible operation and she became really depressed. But for so many children, they're in very abusive situations. Maybe their parents are addicts, and they have these, not just these huge unmet needs where their own needs aren't met, but then where they're put in the situation where they're trying to meet the needs of so many others. They become the carer, not just to their parents, but to their siblings. And because it's too much of an expectation, they don't have the skills available. They're just not capable. And it sets up this whole pattern within you of not being good enough. And as you say, just this striving to achieve and to be perfect and to get everything done, when it's not your fault. It's an unrealistic expectation. You're a child, you're not equipped in any way to do this, and yet it sets up this killer critic. Would you?
Yeah. So
that's how we see it. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is the book, The Dance of the Selves, which I studied in third year naturopathy as part of counselling. So Hal and Sidra Stone were a couple of psychologists, and during one of their therapy sessions, one of them, I forget which one it was, but sort of curled up in a ball and almost went fetal. And they did this work of the dance of the self. So, our first self to develop, which is really who we're most like, is our psychic fingerprint, which is our inner child.
Yeah.
And then, if you think of a baby, we think of, well, a baby cries and mummy comes and gives the baby the breast. But if you maybe don't have a great mummy, you might cry and you might get told off. So, we develop these early selves, and they're supposed to be protective. So the rule maker says, make your bed like this, so that no one can criticize you. And your inner critic says, you haven't done your bed properly, you haven't made your bed properly, do it again, or you didn't pick up all your toys or whatever. So they start off as selves really to protect the inner child, so the inner child isn't criticized. But, as we know from trauma situations, abuse situations, they can develop into these just completely all-powerful. So, my voice was, my inner child was so suffocated by the inner critic. And actually the funny thing was, when we went through those exercises, which is where you move your chair and you speak from that voice, it's incredibly interesting. My anger, because I never got angry, I had, my emotional compass was, I'm nice. I can't have that negative emotion such as anger. So that's another thing that I help unpack, with clients, with actually realizing we've got this emotional rainbow And it's actually healthy to be, to experience anger. It doesn't mean you have to go out and get a gun and shoot someone, but you can go, wow, I'm really angry, and you can pick up a cushion or something and you can bash the bed with it and get your anger. You can go to the gym and you can, it might not make much difference to the situation, but you can express that emotion healthily and enjoy having that feeling of anger. Anyway, so my anger was so disassociated. It was like 5 feet behind me, and I had to move my chair back to that place. And my anger wanted to kill my inner critic for being so nasty to me, for being so nasty to the child. Right. It was quite amazing doing this interesting. Sarah, I haven't used that as a modality for about 20 years, but it's actually so good now I'm talking about it. It's a value. So this self-talk and hearing our self-talk and realizing that voice that tells you only eat an orange a day, and then you'll be perfect sort of thing.
Yes.
You start to grow this aware. I talk about this with my clients. Growing your aware parent ego who says, thanks, inner critic, for saying that. I'm listening to you, but we're going to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to do it this way. And as you know, Sarah, it's like we talk to ourselves so badly. We treat ourselves so unlovingly and so unkindly. And, something that I get my clients that I'm working with, I'll get them to cuddle themselves, and I'll say, and if they didn't have the mum that they needed to have, I'm very lucky. I might have had the mum who was kind of a bit absent and a bit out there, but from a loving, holding, kissing, nurturing point of view, mum was amazing like that. So, it's like, imagine that you've got your perfect archetypal mother that we're actually seeking to heal here. If you've got a fractured father archetype, you keep meeting the wrong kind of men, or you've got the wrong kind of friends, we want to heal this fractured mother archetype. And it's feeling the love for yourself and talking kindly to yourself.
Yes, we say, don't we, that we are our worst critics. And I point out to my clients what they're doing to themselves and say, you would never let anyone else talk to you the way you talk to yourself.
Absolutely.
You would never be friends with that person. You would never have them in your life. So let's get rid of that aspect of you that is in your life. You don't want that in your life. What's it doing? Why is it there? And this
and just becoming aware of that voice and what it's saying to you. I've been working with this lovely young girl for about a year now, and helped her through her binge eating disorder. And what I'm finding as well, which is the naturopath part of me coming out, is that I'm seeing these girls who call themselves vegans or vegetarians, and basically it means that they eat bananas and dates and panna vegan chocolate.
Right.
And they actually don't know what a healthy diet is. And so she'd been saying to me, no, my diet's healthy, and as long as I'm not starving myself, my diet's healthy. And I knew that it wasn't. And she's got her good times and she's got her bad times. When at least she tends to eat all the time now, which is great. But when she has that restrictive day, it'll be a banana, and trying to break this cycle. So she would, and just like I did, exactly like I did when I came out of anorexia. And you just, it was the pizza eating naturopath, for a few, up, down, bread, carbs, everything I denied myself, was just eat bread and carbs and pizza and things like that. So she was doing things like a piece of vegan chocolate, half a vegan chocolate cake, and a bag of vegan pretzels and a bag of vegan chips. And, you just read off this just list of just all high carb stuff. And of course it compounds the problem, because then you start putting on weight. It upsets your hormones and you put on weight in areas that you probably don't want to. And then there's a whole other thing, so getting vegans or vegetarians off these high carb diets and getting them to eat alkalizing veggies, and even less fruit, but more alkalizing veggies and lentils and rice and brown rice, and things. That's a trick. That's a thing. That's a thing. So anyway,
We got to where I interrupted because we picked up on, there was such a couple of really good points, and I knew people would be thinking about them, so I went back to them. But we got to the point where I think you were saying that when you were 17 and you were talking about your anorexia and everything. So where did you go from there with all of this?
Yeah, so I went on, studied naturopathy, became a naturopath, but was very much the codependent naturopath. And then I went on my late gap year to Europe that was supposed to be for a year, and we stopped off in Turkey, and I was in the massive earthquake in Turkey in 1999 that killed 60,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And that was like 2:00 in the morning, the earthquake hit, so we were out of our beds and out of our hotel room, wandering around on the streets, and we ate something, and I remember eating it. As I ate it, it was sort of 2:00 in the afternoon by the time we didn't know what was going on, because we couldn't speak Turkish and a lot of people didn't speak English, so we really had very little idea of what was going on. It was we'd gone to the Australian consulate in Istanbul. They said, apparently there's another big earthquake coming. If you can get out, get out. So that was about midday the next day that we'd gone there. So then we were, really hungry. So we stopped and we ate this thing, and I was eating it thinking, if the electricity went off, I wonder how the refrigeration was. Anyway, so we got really sick because of that. So yet, like another gut consciousness, thing. And then we had 4 months in, we went to the next stop on our round the world ticket, which was Italy. So then we had 4 months of eating wheat and pasta. And so when my ticket was up and I didn't put it back to stay longer, it was up in November. I came home and I was just so delighted to hit Australian soil. But again, we didn't have the probiotics or the understanding of the way the gut worked 20 years ago like I do now. So, I went through 2 years of up, down. Maybe it was this parasite, we're not sure. But my mum would pick it. She'd say to me, "Oh, darling, you've gone green again." And then I'd get these 2 days or 3 days of vomiting and unbelievable, unbelievable yellow diarrhea. It was just, so it's like, I've gone on this consciousness raining journey with my gut this lifetime, aside from all the antibiotics that I took when I was a kid, so anyway, so it's been fun, darling. It's been this interesting ride. Now, around that time, around about 2000, I went to see a therapist. I was on my last kind of crappy relationship with a boyfriend with drug and or alcohol issues. And so I went to see a therapist, and I started to go to the 12-step help group, Al-Anon, which is the sister group of AA. Okay. I was wanting to leave my boyfriend. We just got into this stupid situation where I'd move out because he was still drinking or smoking pot. Actually, he'd smoke pot and then he'd stop pot, but he'd start drinking. And it wasn't as though he was violent or anything like that. It's just being with somebody who was stoned or drinking too much and being belligerent, as well as, a neglectful, it was, same old rescue, needs not being met, neglectful relation, no birthday present, no Christmas present, all those sorts of things. And I was the hostess with the mostess, the cook, the cleaner, went to work, bought the groceries, made amazing meals, lovely in bed, all that stuff, and doing it all on my own. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So one day I'd gone to literally borrow a cup of washing detergent or something from my lovely neighbour, and I said, this relationship, it's killing me. He won't stop smoking pot. He promises he will, and then he does, and then he drinks, and and then he goes back to pot again anyway. And she said, "Come to Al-Anon." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "It's the 12-step, help group for codependents and and people, with an alcoholic or people with a drug dependency." So I did a weekly meeting there. And it was very interesting to go there because there were some people that had been in abusive relationships for years and years, like decades, and they didn't actually want to get out of the abusive relationship. But that made it manageable for them. Whereas I thought, you're all beautiful people, but I don't want to be here. I don't want to be coming back to this meeting in 3 years' time complaining about him. I want to work these steps. It was like the greatest step that I ever did. I took that, I took the first step of admitting that I wasn't responsible for his drug addiction. And from that moment on, it was kind of like, oh my God, I'm here for me. And I can rave on about my stuff to a bunch of people instead of freaking my girlfriends out. I can rave on about my stuff to these people, and there's no judgment, and it stays in the room. And I got to hear about a whole lot of other, really awful stories, which was enlightening because it's stuff that you don't hear every day.
Which, of course, is what this channel is all
That's
about.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I love something that you've said, actually, because every story that we hear, every person I interview, without fail, they get to that point where they decide that they don't want this for themselves, and that they are responsible for themselves and not the other person. Without fail, every interview gets to the point where the person I'm interviewing says, I decided. And this is absolutely critical. You said this relationship is killing me, is where you had got to, but you weren't at the point of, you were probably a bit lost about not knowing what to do. And then you get to the point, I decided to take responsibility for myself. This is absolutely key. And I hope people hear this over and over and over. And then at some point it lands. Because we don't hear something until we're ready to hear it.
Yeah.
So it's just so great that we've got
Sarah, you know what? Look, it's like I say to my girlfriends and my closest girlfriends, they've seen me go on this, incredible trajectory, into becoming a whole other different person. And it's hard for me to connect back to how terrible my thinking was when I was, God, look at me doing the timeline thing. It's in the past, it's in the left. I'm even actioning it, right? But for me to connect back to that broken little person who I was when I was 16, 17 and starving myself, I can still conjure it up, but it seems like another lifetime. It's really, like I said to my friends, I spent the first 50 years figuring out all that crap, and I'm going to spend the next 50 really enjoying my life,
Right.
And it really did. I wish the stuff that I understand now, I wish we'd learnt it at 15. It would have just...
This is one of my things. Number one, to go back to what you said, isn't it wonderful when you get to the point where you are so different that you don't actually recognize who you were? But then this whole thing that you just said, why aren't they learning this stuff in school? The most important thing anyone could be taught today is who they are. To respect themselves, to love themselves, to know what thoughts are theirs, what beliefs are theirs, to know that it's okay to have boundaries, to all these things to just ground you in yourself. If our kids left school full of self-confidence and self-esteem, just loving themselves as whole and complete people, the world would be a completely different place. And we don't teach any of this stuff that, as you say, we then discover. And at 50, we're going, woohoo, now I know all this. Why didn't someone tell me all this when I was so much younger? And the thing is, we know it all now. It's all there. It's all there. And I would love to see.
Look, the other thing which I think is a really big issue, and this is what I go through with my clients and friends, right? And it's not admitting brain sex. Okay, so in the 60s and 70s, when a lot more women started entering the psychology profession, they decided that men and women were the same, but men just didn't express their feelings.
Yes.
Whereas I say, and then they tried to do turn them into men, and then you had all those men crying, and that'd freak me out, because I actually love men being men. Just when they're a healthy representation of the beautiful, masculine sacred, such as I love embodying, the beautiful sacred feminine. So there's a real problem there, and this is what I see with all this kind of with all this equality stuff, and it's not addressing. We may be entitled to equality, and same wages and all those things as men are. However, we are not the same. We are fundamentally different.
Yes.
And there's this brain sex thing. And working with women now more, and knowing the journey that I've been on, and I go through my brain sex, like my brain sex infographic about, what testosterone does to us. And of course, guys have testosterone. They have one hormone. God's absolutely messing with us. We haven't got a hormonal changeover twice in a lifetime. We have one. I've still got my period. I'm 52 years of age, and I've been having periods since I was about 15. That's 37 years every month. I go through this hormonal trampolining. Now, part of that hormonal trampolining, and this is where it gets tricky, and you said that gorgeous thing about making the decision for yourself, is that we are, through estrogen, progesterone, and oxytocin, hardwired. We've got to realize or appreciate, biologically, we are programmed so that when he comes to our village and bashes us over the head and drags us back to his village and has sex with us, we don't stab him in the back in the night. We fall in love with him and have his babies. We are hard and soft wired to be like, and estrogen puts us into contented cow syndrome. So that when I was estrogenic in that part of the month, this isn't too bad, it's okay, and then sort of getting closer to period and period end of the month, oh my God, this is a disaster. I hate my life. I hate my money. I hate my relationship. I don't have any great friends. And I didn't. I had a bunch of fabulously using, flaky friends who loved me going cleaning their houses for them or giving them money or doing a thing. But whenever I was in trouble, no one was there. So appreciating brain sex and what it does to us and how it changes our conditioning, so that, and also, and then with my birth trauma, it's like having the pair of sunglasses on was normal for me. I just, my whole filter, because my emotional buffer was gone and my emotional threshold, and I saw myself as this just bleeding, constantly giving, not meeting my own need. I didn't know, if I had a need because of my Christian upbringing. And I really took it to heart that this man 2,000 years ago died on the cross because I was, was brutally tortured and crucified because I'm so sinful.
It's your fault.
Oh, yes. Terrible stuff. It's such a. That's another. Don't get me started on the broken, fractured Christian narrative. No. My enlightenment about the Supreme Soul has changed somewhat since I find that story, that narrative about the Supreme Soul quite limiting. So it's so true about the brainwashing that we get, introduced to as a child, and how it gives us that particular set of glasses, and that's what we see. And until this one, another one of my infographics that I show my clients, so here's the movie of our life, and it literally is, it's a movie. We culturally incorrectly assume that our eyes are recording reality. They're not. Our eyes, our taste, our feelings, our heart, our hearing, we are feeding signals to this part of the brain. And this part of the brain creates a movie out of it, makes sense of it, and creates a movie. And as you know, with RTT, if we want to change our movie, throwing popcorn at the screen, or I hate my weight, so I'll get my hair done, or I'll get my nails done,
doesn't work.
We need to have a chat to the projectionist. And if someone's playing, especially women, if you're playing the Titanic in your pre-cortex, women confuse and blame and complain about the Titanic but never get clear about Notting Hill. And if we want to change, and that's, as you know, darling, where the RTT and the other sort of skill set what we have is so powerful, because we literally, showing now the infographic, we want to unscrew this broken light bulb. I went to my therapist and he was lovely, and for 18 months, about fortnightly, I banged on about my mum for the first 6 months, I banged on about my brother for the next 6 months, and then I banged on about me for 6 months. So I could really beautifully identify the upholstery on the deck chairs of my Titanic. Did it get me off the Titanic? Not at all. I was still playing, discussing how broken this is, how it came to be broken, how badly broken it was. It didn't get me clear about my beautiful, shining 100-watt light globe at all.
Yeah.
That was another set of skills. And again, when you're going through that estrogen, progesterone, if you've got terrible periods or you've had children and your hormones have never settled down, that's happened to a couple of friends of mine, just getting through that womanly stuff. He's out there wanting to conquer Everest, and, we can't get past the bar of chocolate and the hot water bottle and the, and eating out the cupboard and get out of bed, And so this just isn't appreciated by society at all. It's, hey, go out and kick the footy, and go girls, and you're just as great as guys are. And it's like, you just have no clue about this woman's journey of hormones. And darling, talking about that, Sarah, have you got anything to touch on? And I'll talk more about brain sex and about this emotional spaghetti that we have.
I'm really, really interested in everything you're saying. I love it's obviously it's a different way of looking at things to what we would normally hear. And I love what you said about the 25-watt light bulb. And this is how I explain to people. People will say, well, why have years of therapy not worked? And what I always say is, well, it's because obviously your 100-watt light bulb is sitting in your subconscious, and at the moment it's not lit up.
That's it.
It's dimmed by the projection of the past, everything that's happened before, but you can't light it up by talking to your conscious mind. Where we have to do the healing is in the subconscious.
Or even
what you're talking about, the talking to the 25-watt light bulb, I said it's like if you went to the doctor with a broken arm and your doctor treated your leg, you wouldn't wonder why your arm was still broken. Well, your years of traditional therapy are talking to the wrong part of your mind. Yes, it will get you so far. Yes, you can offload, but there's deep emotional healing that you need to do. You need to do in the subconscious, which is where the light bulb comes on, when we change that narrative in the subconscious.
Or even worse, trying to push change back through the conscious mind.
Yes.
If you're in, and that was what drove me to go to Al-Anon, because I realized that I kept meeting the same guy with a different face.
Right.
Essentially. And I realized that I needed to change on this deeper level. I needed to change I didn't know how to do it then, like I did now. Back in those days, it was more like I'll dance naked on the back lawn under the full moon, which feels fabulous. But again, is it going to change the story here? Probably not. Is buying another crystal and believing in a crystal? And don't get me wrong, I love the energy of crystals, and I've got, a few beautiful crystals, but is having my chakras cleansed going to change that story?
Yeah,
or taking flower essences?
And we know from the incredible results that we get when we do the work with the subconscious. We know what a difference it is. We know that's where the story is sitting, and how easy it is to change the story.
And we know what the litmus test for healing, because it's not paying somebody $100 to tell you a lovely story about how everything's going to be okay and you're going to meet that man next year and having your chakras cleansed, and then going home and 2 days later, or by the time you've gotten home, feeling, realizing that was just a complete and utter waste of time because you're not believing in your crystals enough, or you're not believing in your angels enough, or whatever. The litmus test for healing is that your reality upscales, and hopefully it upscales, into something that you want rather than something that you don't, or you don't keep repeating that. So I do a process of also conscious psychological reversal for my clients, as well as, the RTT sessions or a few sessions of hypnosis or whatever. So I say to them, this is their after their first session with me, this is their homework, and it is to go home to let superconsciousness know, I know that you've been playing the story and you've gotten so used to it and it's so familiar because your dad was an alcoholic or your mum was an alcoholic or, someone was absent. So you're used to playing this story, and I know that you're used to playing it. But what we want to do is point out and psychologically reverse it to start unscrewing your light bulb, to start pointing out to superconsciousness, you know what? I'm playing Titanic and not Notting Hill. Which is, I get them to write 100 reasons why this sucks. So it's like saying to a smoker, write me 100 or 50 to 100 reasons why does being a smoker suck so much? Well, because it gives me dead breath and I know it's going to kill me and I hate the kids seeing me smoke. So you're starting to say to superconsciousness, we've been running this story and we think it's right because it's normal. Because we've been running it for so long, it's just normal. I can't remember what it was like when I was a healthy, normal weight, or I'd like to have the kind of relationship where he buys me flowers and honors me for my birthday, but I actually don't know what that movie's like.
Yeah.
Because I had the dad who died, or I had the dad who was an alcoholic, or who bashed my mum, so I don't know what that movie's like. So I get them to do their 50 to 100 reasons of why this sucks so much, and then I get them to write 100 to 200 or 300 reasons, and they are growing. So how's life going to look like when you've got this? Well, I'll have this much money and it's going to look like this, or whatever it was. And so because I said we're going to grow that new movie and then we're going to install it here so that you play it and you project it out there. And it's part of the... What, darling?
That leads us very nicely onto your healing journey. What was it that you did? Obviously, you had a lot going on here. Not just I know you had a lot going on in your body and your gut.
Yes.
Obviously, it was all connected to what was going on in your mind. As we know, they're not separate. Mind and body are connected. What affects one affects the other. So you obviously got to the point. You're at this meeting and you decide that you don't want this relationship anymore that's killing you. So what was your healing journey? Because there'll be other people that relate to this and go, if people are listening and go, you know what, today I am deciding. And then they go, it's okay. Like you decide and then you go, we've all done it. And you go, I don't know what to do next. We've all been there.
That's so right.
Yeah.
Look,
so what was your journey?
Look, for me, it was I'd also picked up smoking as a habit when I was a child, and I picked up the smoking for confidence, and smoking really fit my rebellious. I'm so perfect with all this stuff, so my rebel has to come out, and I've got to be a smoker sort of thing, and which I uncoupled. I actually I'd got to over 30. And it was literally, I said to God, I want to stop smoking. I'm a naturopath, I don't want to keep smoking when I go to parties. Please, please help me get rid of this thing, because otherwise I just won't drink for 6 months, and then I go to a party and I could be like Patsy Stone out of Ab Fab. I could smoke 5 at once. I'd smoke a packet in a night, My friends would say, what are you doing here? You don't smoke. And I'd say, well, when I have a glass of wine. So anyway, there was definitely like the maturing thing that happened where I started to make healthier choices for myself. And I also got really clear about my relationship. I'm talking about your 100 things that you want. I did this spontaneously sort of when I didn't know what I was doing, but I love that painting by Gustav Klimt of The Kiss. It's one of my favorites. And I bought a card for myself and it had that. And I wrote down, I want to be with a non-smoker, and I want to be with a guy who can enjoy a drink but doesn't have a problem with it. And I'm not a big TV watcher, and I don't want someone who, watches football, cricket, every single sporting thing that's on, and is a big TV head. So I wrote those things down.
And can I make a point here as well, that it's okay. It's okay to ask for those things. I think so often people get caught up in, I'm being selfish. If I want these things, I have to let someone be who they are. Yes, you do, but you can also express your needs in the way that you were and accept that someone like that, it's fine, they can be that way. They're just not right for you. So you
Absolutely.
it's not like you try and get with the guy and then stop him watching his TV and doing all his things. You just accept, no, that person's not right for me, but it is extremely important. And sometimes people need permission. So here we're giving you permission to express your needs and to know that to be healthy in your body and in your mind, you have to get your needs met. And if you are with the right person, they will meet your needs and you will meet theirs. And it's okay. It's okay to know what you want and need and to ask for it.
And if you've got that thing, I said to she was actually a massage client back in the days years ago when I still did massage, and she said, I'll meet the right guy, and we'll go and do dancing lessons together. And I said, darling, can I give you a tip? Go to dance classes. You'll probably meet him there.
Absolutely.
And it is amazing how, you've got that thing that you love doing, like you love singing, or you love playing piano, or you love. One of my executive male clients, he was of like classical pianist standard at piano. His first wife hated the piano, hated classical music. We've got to wonder why we choose these.
Work? Absolutely.
It's like going to a restaurant and saying, you know what, I'm going to choose. I really hate fillet steak. I'm going to have a fillet steak, and I'm going to make myself. Do you know what I mean? It's just bizarre how, and I think this is this thing about it's like I did home economics, and I'm fabulous at making cakes, and I'm a great cook. But it's part of this estrogen thing about, remember, you can't choose what you really want. You're not allowed to choose the relationship. You're not allowed to design that relationship. You're not allowed to design. No, because it goes against our estrogen contented cow. And you can understand why women stay in abusive relationships. I mean, often there's that, I went to see this male coach speak about a year ago. And he talked about it, one of his clients, and she'd taken 10 years to leave an abusive marriage. And he just thought that was insane. And I thought, you've got no idea what it's like where you've got no money and you've got 3 children, and he might not bash the kids, but he bashes you, but he's a good provider. Thought, he just has absolutely no understanding of how protective women are of their children, but knowing I don't want to go out of the frying pan into the fire and end up on the streets with my 3 kids.
And
or worse.
Here's the thing, and I was doing some work on this recently. It's all very well to look at abusive situations and say, oh, just leave.
Yeah.
As a woman, if you're faced with leaving an abusive situation, you're not just leaving the person. You could be in the situation where leaving means leaving your home, all of your things, your children, your friends, your environment, everything you have, everything you know, maybe your pets. It's not just leaving a person, it's leaving a life.
So
and it is huge when you are faced with, why should I leave everything? And sometimes people they'll manage the abuse, or because it's just a part of their whole environment, they accept it because they have everything else. And this is what we have to appreciate, that life is not just the abuse. The abuse is part of life. People will leave when abuse is too much, but there is a very, very, they will accept a lot to keep parts of that, to keep the home, to keep the food on the table, to keep the friends, the environment. And this is what we have to appreciate. It's not that easy it's not like, well, if the person would leave and the rest of your life would carry on as it was, great, fantastic. But that's not the way. Who sees abusers say, oh, I'm really sorry for the way that you feel. I tell you what, I'll leave. It doesn't happen.
No.
The person who is being abused is already a victim. I hate that word, but hey, it describes they're already in the position where they are being undermined and diminished. And then suddenly they have to leave everything too.
Yeah.
It's too much. We ask too much.
And again, we don't have physical upper body prowess. We can't go and work as an unskilled labourer on a job site and get paid $40 an hour being a brickie.
Yes.
So there's often and you know, guys, you know, they've got 2 pairs of jocks and 2 pairs of socks, and they wear them inside out and back to front, so they get 4 wears out of them. They can sleep in their car. A lot of that doesn't apply to women. You know, and this is this whole crazy thing about equality and not recognizing how hard it is, how tough it is, this woman's journey.
And also as women, we surround ourselves with stuff that helps us feel comfortable, helps us feel grounded. You know, and I know it sounds silly, but I know every time I talk to my female clients about this, they understand. You know, we have the favorite throw, the cushions, the candles, all the stuff, the feminine stuff that makes us feel comfortable and grounded.
Yeah.
And just that is, I know it sounds silly, but I've had several female clients recently who are finding it very, very hard to leave their stuff. And I understand.
Yeah, completely.
It's their safety, it's their security, it's what they know.
Yes.
You know? So we have to understand that, yeah, I can understand why a man would think it's crazy that you don't just leave, but it's important that we understand it's not as easy as just leaving a person. It's leaving a life.
Yes.
And I say it's not so easy for us to rebuild.
Yeah.
You know.
So, darling, to answer your question, I suppose on a conscious level, I began to make healthier choices for myself, you know, which was moving towards a nicer life. I was so, you know, kiss the frog and turn him into a prince.
Yes.
That I really started to, you know, and that's that rescuer working on them, you know, if this can be changed, you know what I mean? And he doesn't have to be perfect, you know, and all that stuff. It was just being basically one thing where I was disempowered from both of my parents was that they never sat me down and had the talk like, now, darling, you know, you want to find a guy who's going to be a good provider and look after you and do this and do that, you know, and la, la, la. They were so nice and floppy, and I was all, you know, completely floppy and too over tolerant that I'd have some guy said, I like you, and I'd think, oh, okay, then I suppose I better, you know, be nice and compliant. And, oh, okay, instead of me saying, oh, no, I don't think we'd be suitable at all. No, because you're a smoker. I'd say, yeah, okay, and then I can fix this, you know. So it was rescue and fix and kiss the frog and, you know, and he'll be delighted about turning into a prince. No, he's just happy being a frog. Just go out, you know. He's a frog, and there's nothing wrong with frogs. Frogs are lovely, but, you know, and so it's really fun actually. I ended up marrying a much older man, and he was just the most amazing, you know, all wise. We had a really amazing 10 years together, and he was a workaholic. He was incredible. I used to say to him, darling, you just need 3 wives, you know, because he worked all the time. So there's a bit of me missing him for that. But also, you know, again, I didn't know I didn't know what to do in those days. So I didn't stand up for myself. So when he started to get neglectful, you know, as in, oops, I haven't got you a birthday present, and I could see I was slipping down the totem pole of importance.
Right.
What I should have, we can have another whole other chat about this, Sarah. What I should have done, what I would do now is I would have said, well, darling, can you sleep downstairs for a couple of nights? Because I've got a headache. So, you know, needed to miss me. And then I would have said, darling, I'm going to go to Melbourne for a few days and let him miss me.
Mm-hmm.
I was always there on tap, always giving, always the personal assistant, you know, always meeting everything. So I didn't stand my ground. And it's not, well, you don't buy me flowers anymore and I want flowers. it's as good as I'll just go away and do my own thing for a few days. You can miss me,
You're
and
not seeing me. You're not hearing me. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
and
feel relevant. I don't feel important.
Well, I mean, look, the gorgeous thing about that, Sarah, is that it's not just feeling important. It's knowing that there's been this shift that's taken place where once I was his precious treasure,
Yes.
and I've slipped down the totem pole because I was too nice.
Okay.
I was just too. I still didn't.
That
When I
happened
was
in my marriage for sure.
when I was married, I still didn't know how to. And here's the thing: it doesn't have to be this demand and this confrontational stuff. I needed to get my needs met, and increasingly they weren't, and because of a considerable difference in our ages, I got to the point where I thought, it was like he was not wanting to do things. He didn't particularly want to go out to dinner parties. He'd done 40 years of around the world travel and sailing, and he didn't want to do that. And I thought, well, my next adventures are just starting. And so we really dislocated after 10 years. And when I left, Dad, I was so pleased because I thought Dad might say, and I came home for a few weeks, and I thought Dad might say to me, well, you got married and you made your bed, you should go back. But he said, darling, you work all the time. He used to look after you. You can see that he doesn't look after you anymore. It takes a lot of energy to leave. Stay out of it.
Right. Nice.
It was amazing.
You had permission.
Yeah, I did. It's like I got permission from Dad, and actually because Dad's so old world valued and such a sweetheart, I really expected the other thing. And no, he said stay, and I stayed. And it was a bit of then it was. I didn't want to be a sort of classical hypnotherapist, naturopath, working out of a little office somewhere. I really wanted to, have a bigger life, and then I studied coaching and things. So in relation to your question about healing myself, there was that process of making healthier choices for myself. But this is the other thing. It was really getting out of my emotional spaghetti neurotic brain, which was, and this was something I'm blessed that my husband actually taught me this. He'd done actually studied a lot of philosophy, and he hadn't done woo-woo healing things like I had, but he'd done a lot of meditation and philosophy and Hindu philosophy and science of the mind stuff, as well as a lot of personal development. And so what I realized was when we were spending time together, and probably, growing up a bit more as well. So I was getting into my mid-30s then. I began to realize that, because I had a feeling about something, it didn't make it real and it didn't make it right. And I don't mean suppress your feelings by any means at all. If you feel angry, go to the gym and punch the punching bag, or do some pillow therapy and smack the bed and have some screaming therapy. But what I realized was I came out of having a bad feeling about it, once upon a time I just was so unresourced. So when that thing happened, someone runs into my car and it's going to cost $300 to get it fixed or whatever, and I might not have had the money at that stage. So you go home and you feel bad, and you eat a kilo of chocolate, or you're having boyfriend trouble and your friend comes around, with a box of tissues and a bottle of Chardonnay and a kilo of chocolate, and you watch, the rerun of Notting Hill for the 10th time, and you eat the chocolate, and complain about how bad it is. So I talk to my clients about getting that mad, bad, sad outside in, but being able to change from your subconscious up, which is to change from inside out and to be in alignment with it. So as well as being a lot more resourced now and being much healthier now, I have an incredible diet. When I first studied diets in the 90s, they were the high carb, low fat diets, which are disastrous. It's mental health if you're not actually sort of smoking and drinking Coke all the time and just living on McDonald's, a lot of the diets that people have, the cornflakes for breakfast and the sandwich for lunch and the pasta for dinner,
Oh,
it's all non-food. It's all actually non-food. So now my diet is amazing. So that, supports lots of antioxidants, lots of superfoods, lots of real food. So, that supports the temple and the mental health and the hormones and everything else. So, tied up with this is that we see so many people, and of course they're suffering depression, but you look at their diet and it's literally a diet for depression. It's inflammatory, it's full of sugar. If they're carrying a lot of weight, they're going to be really hormonally out as well. So again, too much sugar, insulin resistant, really messes with your hormones, really messes with your mental state, makes it really hard to get out of this emotional spaghetti brain and having bad feelings about things.
I will say I found that for myself as well. As I healed myself emotionally, I am mostly vegan, occasionally vegetarian, just depending if there isn't a choice,
Yeah.
So I try to be vegan, but I eat real food. I love loads of vegetables, loads of salads, and just without the dairy and without all those kind of stuff.
Fantastic.
And the difference in my body, my weight is my weight just doesn't change, and I'm nearly 55.
Brilliant.
And I'm still the size I was just after I had my boys.
Wow.
But as you say, all of that balance, I'm so much more balanced now. But I feel it in both in my body and in my mind that I have this good diet now, and that things are stable, and that I eat properly, and maybe at the moment a couple of hot cross buns too much.
Yeah, of course.
I cannot remember the last time I sat down and ate chocolate. Not even a piece of it, let alone.
Wow, that's amazing. Well done.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And cakes and biscuits and stuff. I'll eat a tiny amount occasionally. But most of the time, once I start, I'm like, oh, what am I eating?
It's too sweet. It's too sweet. It's got too much sugar in it. Yeah.
So just to give, just to back that up, that you feel so much better when you are eating. It's like the fuel for your car. The fuel for your body is the same as the fuel you give your car. It needs the right thing. It needs the right fuel to run properly. You wouldn't put diesel in your petrol car. You wouldn't put cheap petrol in your premium car. Well, treat yourself like a premium car and give yourself the right fuel. You're worth
exactly.
it. And the results are amazing. Like I still have, nearly 55, have great skin, great hair, great nails, and it all comes from the right fuel, for sure.
Yes.
Everything has settled down for me since I've been focusing on that. And that all came from learning to love myself, the healing that we do.
And again, Sarah,
for myself.
it's making those great choices. So, going to yoga or going on a lovely walk regularly, looking after yourself. I've never been drawn to sort of violence or horror kind of films, so some clients, you can see that, it's like their nightmarish reality is this reflection of all this stuff that they're drawn to, which is really dark and, and they're all just soapies, and it's full of that up-down drama, all that manipulated up-down drama things, or even watching things like maths or the kitchen shows, all that manufactured drama. They leave me for dead, because I just can't do all that sort of just all that up-down
the drama,
psychological manipulation, and so I just can't do it. So. I've read Gandhi's autobiography, for instance. I love Greek philosophy. I love Asian philosophy. I love some of this, some of those the sort of the deep rules of Buddhism or the central tenets of Hinduism, not so much about the pantheon of gods, but the actual philosophy, which is God is in me and God is in you and God is in God. So I found those things, and meditating, properly just meditating, trying to get stillness, in the lobes here, and realizing. Actually, that was a funny thing. When I first started meditating, I had such a circus going on. It actually used to drive me crazy. It wasn't like, I went to this Zen place at all, because, of course, the mental chatter would go insane. I actually did, must be nearly 20 years ago, I bought the HoloSync program. Bill Harris is one of the teachers on The Secret, and I actually invested in that HoloSync program. It's much, much cheaper now because it's all just download the things. But that's a program that meditates us. And as I worked through the levels, and I got deeper and deeper, and I got to that, that deep stillness that I couldn't at that stage get to those places myself. And it's amazing how the little, as we know, Sarah, it's that little putting one step in front of, the other, and those little building blocks build up. It's like saying no to the chocolate, and it's like going for that 30-minute brisk walk. It's like, actually, I had a little bit of a tear in my triceps, and so I couldn't do push-ups for about a year. And when I began doing push-ups again, I could only do 5 push-ups a few months ago. Now I'm back to doing 50.
Right. And it's that. So if you don't start, you don't start. But
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So choosing to turn off the box and, actually read a book, or, watch some enlightening sort of thing with a great healer such as Louise Hay, or or Brendan Bayes, or do you know what I mean? Or checking in with this stuff. This is valuable. I try to say to especially my young clients, where they've just grown up with screens and the constant stuff, put it down, read a book, read some philosophy, learn some history, do something that's valuable. You've got all that brain candy fluff, and it's always going to be there.
But when it comes to food, I mean, on Netflix, we've got these amazing documentaries. Forks Over Knives is one that I've been recommending recently. So much amazing stuff that is available to us. I mean, the personal development, the healing, everything is out there. Joe Dispenza at the moment is one of my favorites for all the mind stuff that he does.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Marvelous.
So obviously for you, and again, this is the theme that comes up, it's about deciding, and again, they're just making decisions from a healthier mindset. But what's some of the main tools that helped you do that? Because it's okay to talk about doing it, but it's hard to do. So what were the main therapies or tools that helped you to do that?
So once upon a time, I relied heavily upon, EFT and tapping.
Okay.
And I still teach my RTT clients that, because particularly so if they're prone to something like depression, just being able to breathe and tap and, just feel the emotion is really great. And just jettison that excess yin chi out of your energy field is fantastic. So EFT was a really big skill for me, just eating a better and better diet. About 10 years ago, I really started to take the fruit out of my diet, because I was still hoovering a whole lot of wet sugar, eating way too much fruit. So I really went through another dietary kind of revolution now about 10 years ago, and started to become a little bit more paleo, not necessarily eating a lot of meat, but I knew that gluten was bad for me, and I knew that upset my gut, but I would cheat a lot. So I've really gone fairly strictly off gluten in the last 5 years. I've always been sensitive to dairy food, so that hasn't been an issue. I feel really blessed, because there's things like, you can have 90% limp dark chocolate in it. Chocolate, and there's no dairy in it, there's barely any sugar in it, so it doesn't trip your sugar switch. And so I've actually just really been educating a lot in the last few years about hidden sugar, and the effect of carbohydrates and grains, as opposed to, eating veggies or or beans or whatever. And it's really great. I've introduced a lot more of that kind of food to my parents as well, which is fantastic. They can't do a lot of spicy food, so I've got to be wary of the chili and the spices if I'm making a curry, but it's really lovely. They've switched over to eating a lot more brown rice, a lot more chickpeas and things, and a lot more veg, which is great. So there's
your healing. Sorry, so a lot of your healing did come from your focus on food, from your focus on what you were putting into your body.
I think it's all those things, darling. I think it's and plus doing classical hypnosis, which I did about 10 years ago. Yeah. So just being able to unpack more easily the superconscious mind, and start to upgrade it. But so it was that combination of consciously choosing to do healthier things. Also massively was Al-Anon. Going to Al-Anon really helped, where I just really started to just disengage from toxic people.
Okay, great.
Toxic, unhappy. Oh. That was massive. I got to that point where I just realized that I wasn't serving myself being around deeply troubled, unhappy, toxic people who were still choosing to do, to smoke pot or to smoke cigarettes or to overindulge in alcohol and things like that. Or they just weren't really pleasant people to be around. So I really started to disengage. So that was a really big thing as well.
I really hope people take that on board, because it's huge to actually be able to see yourself disconnect from the negative and toxic people in your life, and to be able to stand back and see what you are absorbing from them, what they are putting into your life, the kind of energy they are giving out, and to be able to realize, no, I don't want that. This is huge. Again, people have this resistance to, oh no, they've been my best friend for years, or no, I've always gone on holiday with them. Or if you change and you see people as they are, and they are not right for your life where you're at, let them go. It's okay. It's another thing we have to have permission almost to do, and to not feel bad, but for seeing what's coming into our life and what we are absorbing and what it is making us, and saying, no, I don't want that anymore. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's so important.
I think it was sort of like a whole lot of things that I'd started in little bits all added up. Do you know what I mean? And they and got better and better. And then when I met my husband, my life changed completely into the businesses that we got into setting up and running. And so that was helpful as well. And because he was so, he'd done so much personal development, I just had this treasure trove of books to read and things to study, and not a lot of TV, and
how wonderful.
Silence. We had an open fireplace, so we'd you have the open fire going, and it's cold during winter down here, so being able to literally just read and unplug from movies and TVs. And I actually really went through 10 years where I just didn't really watch any TV whatsoever. So I got a lot of that still time, and plus because we had a yacht charter business, I got to do lots and lots of sailing. And when you're just out there being massaged by the winds and the waves,
wonderful.
That's a whole other gorgeous experience as well. So just getting to that out there with not a lot around you, just the stars above or whatever,
How wonderful to have someone inputting into you. Like you said, recognizing the toxic people and letting that go, but not just that, then being absolutely filled with the opposite. That would be amazing. The closest I can think about that was the RTT that we did, that 12 days, just being immersed in that positive energy and that healing. That for me, that was absolutely transformational for me.
Yeah.
That changed me so much. And then recently, not a lot of people know this, but when I was in South America recently, and I went on an 11-day ayahuasca retreat. and I did
Wow.
ayahuasca, and that was very similar. That
Wow.
that amazing input that just
Yes.
transformed me yet again, moved me on. So and that's the only thing I can, those are the kind of things I can think of, those really transformational experiences that would be like having someone just input so much knowledge and goodness. And yeah, that would be amazing to be in the presence of someone like that. No, yeah, fantastic for you that it helped you so much.
I don't believe in soulmates anymore because actually I believe that there's just one soul, and that's the supreme soul, and we're sparks of it. But you know, we Kerry and I were together at a time when it was a really important phase of my life, and it was really like I learned what I needed to learn from him, and then it was like our dance was
right. Yes,
done,
dance was done.
and we let go.
Absolutely too.
Yeah,
Absolutely too.
and now what I figure is I'm not short of male company, but I'm really wanting to move myself professionally to another place, and I know that when I have this final healing, that I'm quite likely to meet the next person that I'll have a bit of a dance with. But it's really lovely coming from always desperately needing to be in a relationship, and then getting into male female relationships that just didn't meet my needs at all. It's so nice to be complete in myself. And actually, so on that note about dropping toxic people, because I changed, I just remember this conversation that I had with a friend of mine, and we're back being really tight again. But there's a time when I went through that sort of intense reading, fixing myself, fixing myself, really coming out of, my emotional spaghetti neurotic brain, and having a bad feeling and feeling bad about it and all that stuff. Just realizing this is just a feeling that I'm having now. What positive action am I going to take? And what positive action that leads me further down my path of the destination that I want to go to, rather than just eating chocolate or feeling bad or whatever. But so at one stage I caught up with my girlfriend, and she said to me, "Do you know that I've seen you twice in the last 3 years?" And I was a bit like, "Oh, really? Has it been that long?" I went through this sort of metamorphosis, sort of, I went through this sort of chrysalis in a cocoon stage of reading and doing stuff and setting up businesses. And I gave her the book. There's a book, it's by Anthony DeMello. It's called Awareness. And it's all about how, there's all these great little stories in it, and it really interrupts that riddle of what you expect from other people and what's this kind of just fantasy that we have about how that person's supposed to meet our needs or whatever. So I like to think of myself now as, once upon a time, it was like, oh, I'm a half and I'm looking for another half, whereas now I think, no, I'm a whole. And I like hanging out with other wholes. Some of them are women, some of them are men, and together we do these beautiful, infinity dances. Yeah. And I gave her the book, and she hated it. And she was just starting to study yoga at that stage. She couldn't get into it at all. And then it was literally 5 years later, we caught up a little bit more, and I'd have these difficult conversations with her because she just, couldn't see where I was coming from at all. But she kept seeing me going through this, transformation, becoming this whole other person. And then about 5 years later, I gave her that book for her birthday, and she said, I get it now. I love it. I may not understand all of it, but I get where he's coming from. And, so it's hard, it's hard going through that personal change where people don't see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it is. It is hard, very hard. And what you just said as well is a lovely illustration of what we said earlier about you can't hear something until you're ready. You can take action on something that you've heard 100 times before, and suddenly you're at the point where it means something to you. So that's a lovely illustration of that.
And if I might touch, just going back to sort of empathy and intuition and trusting your intuition, and that, because when I see a lot of the healing stuff on, like say on Facebook, and it's all about trust your intuition. And I say, actually, don't trust your intuition, because if you're plugged into the Titanic, it was like the stories I used to tell myself about the men that I used to meet, and they're all bad. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, so now that my super consciousness is cleared out, and I used to have massive nightmares when I was a kid. So, there's a lot of fearful, this part of my mind was telling a lot of fearful stories, trying to make sense of that bumpy birth trauma that I had and bumpy few early years. So, if you're plugged into the Titanic, and you are, because of the reality of your life, being, say, morbidly obese, or being terribly depressed, or having anxiety, having these disordered thoughts, or having an eating disorder, maybe it's best to really look, and instead of talking to your friends, because they're probably going to mirror, they're your friends because they're probably going to mirror a lot of this stuff, seek a mentor and seek someone who's healed. And it's hard. It's probably like between my women's activities, it's like healing the wounded healer, and that they're healed. There's an awful lot of healers out there. They're, very overweight, or, they're the ones that are scoffing chocolate and cakes and have arthritis or fibromyalgia. So that they're not healed. So, it's like, look at you, Sarah. Now, this gorgeous glowing example.
Oh,
it's written, and the wisdom, so that you're not just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, coming from a different place.
Yes.
Hill. I love your illustration there. Yeah, absolutely. And this whole thing about intuition, as you say, it depends where your intuition is coming from. Is your intuition coming from a place that is whole and healthy and healed, or is it coming from fear and lack and abuse and badness? Yeah, absolutely. It makes a huge difference. Huge.
Because, it's like me, that the relationships that I used to have with men, it's like, is this just another man with a different face? But it's the same. And I used to have those kind of, psychic, like, it's meant to be fateful meetings. I was meant to meet this person. And I'd tell myself all those fabulous stories. And I'd end up, yet again with another person, usually with a drug problem, or an alcohol problem, and that they're not likely to be good to look after us in turn and be supports for us if they've got those things going on. And normally it's, for them it's covering up. I think the trouble was that, especially in that last bad relationship that I had before I got married, he'd had a really abusive father. And that's where it's like you're bleeding on each other. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I was hoping, again, kissing the frog, hoping he'd turn into a prince, that I can fix him and I can fix him up and I can get him, through over all this terrible abuse that he had at the hands of his father, who was a returned war veteran, who used to, take his belt off and belt him and, bash him, belt him, but also really verbally abuse him. So he smoked pot to keep all that down.
Of course, yeah.
And then, but unfortunately, instead of him, I got to that point where I said to him, you really have to go to Odyssey House. You've got to go through. Not having the skills that I have now, of course. This is over. It's like nearly 20 years ago now. But if I had the skills then that I have now, well, I probably would have sent him to another RTT to have some work done. But so.
And this is the important realization as well. You're talking about your husband and his father. It's hurting people who hurt. So whilst it's not an excuse to keep doing it, and they do have to heal, and they can heal, and they will change if they do heal, but most of them don't recognize it as that. It's important to recognize, to know that the person who's hurting you is coming from their own hurt. And the other important thing here that you're talking about is the fact that until we heal ourselves, until we change, we do keep reliving and repeating these patterns. And it's important. Like, some people will say, oh, why do I keep attracting these men, or all men are horrible, or whatever? Well, what's the common denominator? The common denominator in your patterns is you.
Exactly.
You are the one that shows up every time in this same situation.
Yeah.
So it has to be about you. And I think this is something that people, they try and reject. No one ever wants, and it's not about blame. It's about understanding. We all want to think that there's something wrong with other people. But when we keep repeating a pattern, the way to break it and the way to heal is to stop and say, hang on, this is all about me. And come at it from a completely different angle. It's never about the other person. It's always about you. And even if you're with an abuser, you're the one that's allowing it to happen. You're the one that's staying. So there is something about you in this situation that can change this, can make this different, can change this pattern. It is when you understand it's always about you, is when you can make these changes and start to think about things in a healthier way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there we go. Well, thank you. My goodness, Heather, thank you so much. You've shared so much with us, and I'm absolutely certain that we will do this again, and that I know you've got so much more that you haven't said. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have you on as a returning guest in a few months' time and find out where you're up to, and we'll share more of our journeys, where we've got to, and because we're all changing all the time. That's what I love about the people that I do these interviews with in the healing space. No one is standing still. Everyone is unpeeling more layers and transforming. And I'd love to hear more. I know it's something you've started, but hopefully by then you'll have more about your empowering women's movement, which I'm sure will be of major interest to so many of our listeners. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared. And yeah, hopefully there's some food for thought there for many, many people. So
I hope so, darling. It's such a delight catching up with you. Yes. From all the way down here in Melbourne, all the way across to the west there where you are.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for all you're doing. And yeah, we'll catch up again soon. And of course, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, all of your links will be in the notes for the show.
Lovely.
Do what you do. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.